everyone and welcome to another Peaky Boardgamers episode. My name is Rakos and in today's video I'll be explaining a system this time which is Super Fantasy Brawl, produced by Mythic Games and designed by Johan Eisenhoff. This is a brutal arena war game, mainly to be played with 2 players fighting against each other, but it can also be played with 4 players, 2 against 2. In this video I'll be explaining the dual rules only. Now, as I said, this is a system, so I really recommend that you switch on the Klingon subtitles to see any corrections that might appear in the future. I can't wait to start explaining this one to you, so let's jump right in. Welcome in the arena of Super Fantasy Brawl. In the game, players choose their 3 champions and then lead these champions to battle by using a corresponding set of 6 action cards. Players will move and attack with their champions, avoid traps, control areas, and wisely use the 3 cores of magic. Players are actually racing to reach 5 victory points. Players gain victory points each time they knock out one of their opponent warriors, but mainly by satisfying objectives on challenge cards. The player who reaches 5 victory points first will prevail in the arena and win in a game of Super Fantasy Brawl. At first, place the board in the middle of the table. What we see on the board is an arena split in hexes, forming several areas we need to explain. We have 2 deployment areas, one for player A and one for player B. In the game there are 3 cores of magic: the red destruction, the yellow creation and the blue manipulations. Each core of power has a corresponding area depicting the same color, as well as a statue hex. Also, there are 6 trap hexes on the arena, indicated by this symbol. Players choose on a side either the sword or the axe and then toss this token. The winner of the toss will be the first player and keeps this token next to their entrance. The other player will be the second player. Create supplies of magic core tokens, victory points and damage tokens next to the board. Also create a supply of trap markers which should be placed with this side facing upwards, and then you should shuffle them. Shuffle the challenge cards and place them facing downwards to the dedicated space on the left side of the board, then flip the top card and place it facing upwards onto the first space which does not depict a victory point symbol. Each player takes a personal board and then the 3 bases corresponding to their color. Then players take 1 core of each type of magic, which is placed in the dedicated space of the personal board. Now players are ready to choose their 3 champions. Choosing your 3 champions is done using a drafting mechanism. There are 2 methods, a common drafting and a competitive drafting used for tournaments only. Now in this video I'll be explaining only the common drafting method. The casual draft way is to create a common pool of at least 6 unique champions. Then, starting with the second player, players alternate turns choosing one of the champions until they have 3. Players then insert their champions in the bases of their color. Each champion has a dedicated personal card as well as a dedicated set of 6 action cards. The personal card of each champion has a special symbol which will help you to identify the 6 dedicated action cards. Each player now takes all cards which are connected to the chosen champions. Players then place the champion cards to the dedicated spaces on their personal board. Make sure that you use the level 1 side facing upward. It's the side which does not depict a power in the bottom. Then players shuffle all 3 champion action card sets together and they form a face-down draw pile next to them. Then the first player takes 2 random trap tokens and without looking at them, selects any 2 trap hexes to place them. Then the second player does the same, placing another 2 traps. Then the first player draws their starting hand, which is 5 cards. After examining the cards, the player may select any number of them to be discarded and then draw replacements. The player can do this only once, and then after they finish, they reshuffle the discarded cards back in their deck. Now the second player repeats this process. Players keep their cards secret at all times. As a last step, the first player goes first and places their champions onto their deployment hexes. Then the second player does the same, and the battle is now ready to start. The game is played in rounds until one of the players has gained 5 victory points, which will automatically make that player the winner. Each round is split to 3 phases. In the first phase, the first player takes a turn, then the second player takes a turn, and then we have the advanced challenge track phase, in which all challenge cards move 1 space to the right and the new challenge card is placed in the first space here. Then the next round begins. The first player takes a turn, then the second player takes a turn, and then we move all challenge cards and flip the next card. As I said, this continues until one of the players has reached 5 points. Now let's analyze a player's turn. Let's say it's the orange player's turn. A player's turn is also split to 3 phases. The first one is the scoreboard phase, which has to do with challenge cards. Challenge cards are very important because they offer objectives that, if satisfied by the active player at the start of their turn, they grant that player victory points depicted here. So in the scoreboard phase, the active player checks all challenge cards except then the challenge card in the first space that grants no victory points to see if these are satisfied. The first challenge card would grant the active player 2 victory points if they had a champion adjacent to each one of the 3 statues. Unfortunately, the player doesn't have a champion adjacent to this statue, so he cannot score these points. The next card would grant the player with 1 victory point if they controlled the yellow creation area. To control a specific area, you need to have more champions than the opponent in that area, which is the case here. So the orange player gains 1 victory point as it's depicted in the space where the challenge card was located, and then the challenge card is discarded in the last space of the track. Next we have the main phase of the player's turn, which is the activation phase. During this phase, the player spends core, plays cards, and activates their champions. During this phase, a player can use 1 or more of their cards in their hand. There are 4 main characteristics on these cards. One is the color, which is connected to the type of core that the player will have to spend in order to use the card. The second main characteristic is the symbol in the top left corner. This indicates which champion will be activated by using this specific card. So if I use this card, I would have to spend 1 blue core and then I activate this champion. But if I use this card, I need to spend 1 red core and I activate this champion. The third characteristic is the background shape of this symbol. This symbol means the card is an attack card and it definitely involves some combat. This symbol means that the card is a skill card, does various things, but it does not involve a direct combat. Finally, we have these cards. These are reaction cards. A player may only play these when it's the opponent's turn after the opponent has played an attack card. We'll talk more about reaction cards in a bit. A player can play any number of cards during their turn, provided they have the corresponding core to pay for the cost. After you play 1 card, it is discarded in a personal discard pile. We need to say that discard piles of both players is open information for both players. So one player can check their opponent's discard pile and they may also check both sides of the champion cards. Apart from just playing cards, a player may also make use of standard actions depicted in the top right corner of the player's board. The main difference with action cards is that with standard actions, players may activate any champion to perform the selected action. Let us now analyze how we resolve an attack card, and by doing so you will understand most aspects of the game. This card costs 1 blue core that has to be paid immediately and will activate this champion, offering the option to attack. On the left, the top icon is movement. So this card enables the player to move the activated champion for up to 2 hexes. Important! Movement is the first thing we do when resolving an attack card. We can move the figure less than 2 hexes or even not move it at all. However, we cannot first attack and then move. Movement is very simple. You can move 2 hexes like that or like that. Enemy champions and also statue hexes block movement. However, allied units do not, and players may move through those hexes. Of course, you may never stop movement in an occupied hex. When referring to allies, it's all of the player's champions except than the one being activated. In this example, I want to move my champion to this hex. To do so, I have to pass through a trap hex containing a trap. Whenever this happens, movement is paused. The trap is revealed, and then the effect is applied to the champion that triggered it. In this case, the champion takes 3 damage, which is placed on top of his champion card. After applying the effect of the trap, the player who controls the champion that triggered the trap needs to add another trap in the board. The player takes a new trap from the supply and again without looking at it, he adds it to any vacant trap hex on the board. If there is no vacant trap hex, then the trap may be placed to any hex which is adjacent to a trap hex and is not a statue hex. When referring to a trap hex, we mean all hexes that either have this symbol or contain a trap. There should always be 4 traps on the board. After you place the new trap, the old trap is reshuffled in the supply. If the trap has no effect stopping the champion's movement, the champion may continue moving. Now let's see what happens after movement. Take a look at this icon depicted on the card. This symbol indicates a post-attack effect, and there's also this symbol that indicates pre-attack effects. After movement, all pre-attack effects of the player can be activated. This card doesn't have a pre-attack effect, so that step is not applicable. In the next step, the player has to choose if they will perform the attack or not. If the player does not attack, then resolving the card is over. This brings us to a very important assumption. Pre-attack effects can happen even if the player does not choose to continue with the attack afterwards. In this example, I will choose to proceed with the attack, so the next step is to declare the targets of it. This symbol on the card indicates which targets can be declared. In this case, we have an area of attack, which are 3 connected hexes adjacent to the activated champion. The player then chooses where to apply the area of effect. I choose it to be these 3 hexes. Important! If an allied unit is in these 3 hexes, that unit would also be the target of the attack. In this example, however, the targets of the attack are these 2 opponent champions, Dugrun and Guayan. Let's explain some more targeting symbols that are found, for example, in some of Darren's attack cards. This symbol here means that the attack card is an indirect shot and can target any one opponent champion, which is up to 4 hexes away. This symbol, however, means that the attack card is a direct shot. Again, it can target an enemy champion which is up to 4 hexes away, but the target must be in the same row with the attacker, and statue hexes as well as any champion figure blocks line of sight. So using this attack card, Darren cannot target any opponent champion. After targets are declared, it's time for the defender to decide whether they're gonna be playing a reaction card. Defenders may play only 1 reaction card per attack card, not 1 per declared target. Player of course has to be able to pay the core, and reaction cards can target any of the player's champions and not just the one indicated in the picture, and as you can see, there is no champion symbol in the top left corner. So the defender pays 1 red core to play Dark Steel Armor on Guayan. The card will increase her armor by 1. The card also depicts a post-attack effect, but that will happen later. Now it's time for the actual attack. This symbol indicates the strength value of the attack that each target will take. This will be translated to damage taken, but first, the target's defense value is subtracted from the current strength value of this attack. Durgan's defense value is 2, so no damage will be taken. Gwyn's defense value after being strengthened from the Darksteel armor is 1, so Gwyn as well will not receive any damage. Whenever a champion takes damage, this damage is placed on the champion's card. The maximum damage that the champion can take is depicted in the top right corner of this card. In this case it's 7. If damage reaches or passes this threshold, then the champion is taken out of action. The champion is removed from the arena and placed on the entrance. All damage is returned back to the supply, and if the champion was leveled up, as it happens now, then the champion is leveled down by flipping the card to the other side. A champion that is taken out of action can come back into the arena by activating the champion using a card that has a move symbol or with a standard action that also provides movement. The first step of this movement will always have to be a hex in the deployment area of the player. On the other hand, the player that manages to take out of action an opponent champion immediately gains 1 victory point. Also, the activated champion levels up if not already leveled up. To do so, you flip the corresponding champion card to the other side. If the champion had any damage on it, this will be moved to the other side of the card. Now Kilgore is immune to Stan, and this will be in effect for as long as Kilgore is leveled up. After resolving the attack and damage is inflicted, post-attack abilities that are shown on the reaction card played take effect immediately, but only if the corresponding champion is not taken out of action. The reaction card played earlier has such a post-attack effect, and since Gwyn is not taken out of action because of the attack, it comes in effect immediately and grants Gwyn another 2 defense for the rest of the active player's turn. As a last step, post-attack abilities shown on the attacker's card are now resolved. Again, this happens only if the attacker was not taken out of action during the attack. Here we have a push 1 post-attack ability, and since the attacker is still alive, it comes in effect. Push 1 means that each target has to be pushed 1 hex away from the target, and this has to be done in a straight line. So Durgan is pushed here and Gwyn is pushed here. If this push made the defenders step on traps, then these traps would be resolved as normal. If push is not possible because something blocks the way, then for each movement that cannot be done, the champion takes 1 damage. So if we had this situation, then Gwyn would not be able to move and would take 1 damage. This concludes the resolve of an attack card. However, you need to know that in comparison to pre-attack abilities, post-attack abilities do not take effect if the player chose not to attack. Now I'll guide you through the use of a skill card, which is much more simple. This one activates Daring. Again, if there is movement involved, it has to be done first. This one has movement of 2, I choose to move Daring 1 hex to the left. Next, again the player must choose if they are going to use the skill. If yes, the player must then choose an applicable target. This card must target an enemy champion which is in direct 4 range. The only applicable target to be declared here is Durgan. When playing a skill card, the opponent has no opportunity to play any reaction card. So after declaring the target, you resolve the text on the card. This one says that the next attack on the target this turn ignores defense and gains +1 strength. So imagine I played the attack card I demonstrated earlier right after this skill card. I would initiate an attack against these 2 enemies. This time Durgan's defense would be 0 and the attack strength against him only would be 2 instead of 1. So Durgan would receive 2 damage before being pushed backwards. Now let's give the details of standard actions. As I said earlier, the player may activate any one of their champions when using them. The first one uses a blue core and grants the activated champion a movement of 1, and then the player also plants 1. Plan 1 means that the player places any 1 card from their hand back on top of their draw deck. This means that the player will redraw this the next time they draw cards. The next action uses a yellow core and grants the activated champion a movement of 1, but also heals that champion of 1 damage. So if I choose Goldar, I may move him once and then heal him. The next one uses a red core and grants the champion 1 movement as well, but also deals 1 damage to an enemy that is adjacent to the activated champion. When you deal damage, armor of the opponent is inapplicable. This is actually unavoidable damage. With the last standard action, the player pays any 1 core and then moves the activated champion up to 2 hexes. After the activation phase, the player's turn finalizes with the upkeep phase. In the upkeep, the player first refreshes all of their cores. Then the player discards all remaining cards in their hand and draws 5 new cards from the draw pile. That were actually all the rules of the game. However, most effects and abilities depicted on cards use keywords that you need to understand before playing. Some of these keywords are already explained in this video. In the last part of this video, I will explain the rest of these keywords. Let's start with blooded. A champion is regarded to be blooded if they have 3 or more damage. If a card instructs that you make a champion become blooded, it means you give damage to that champion until they have 3. Jump X is a special movement. Imagine this as if the champion was able to jump and then land to any valid hex within the X distance. Dash X is another special movement. Again, you must move within the indicated range, but you must move in a straight line. Swoop X is another straight line special movement, but the difference with Dash is that you disregard any obstacles in the way. Imagine Swoop as being a jump in a straight line. Take note that if you end movement on a trap, this trap is sprung. Place. If a card instructs for something to be placed somewhere, you take this something and you place it where the card indicates. Root. There are also traps that cause this effect. When a champion gains root, they lose all further movement points, and in addition to that, for the rest of the player's turn, the player may not move, dash, swoop, or jump with this champion. The stun effect. Again, this can also be found in traps. When a champion gets stunned, the player must discard any 1 card from their hand which is linked to this champion. If the player had no such cards, they must reveal their hand to the opponent to prove this. Now some more keywords relating to attacks. If an attack has double, then the damage inflicted from this attack is inflicted a second time, as if it were doubled. If an attack has lifesteal, then the damage inflicted also heals the attacker for an equal amount of damage. Poison X inflicts X damage to the defender, but only if the normal attack inflicted at least 1 damage, otherwise poison damage is lost. Force X, the player that played a card that has force, takes the controlled champion and moves it for X hexes in any direction, probably passing it from traps, hitting him to walls, etc. Fear X. If an attack or any other source make a champion fear, then the owner of this champion must move this champion for X hexes away from that source. This means that each step must increase the distance of this champion from the source of fear. Draw X means that the player may draw up to X cards from their draw pile. However, they must declare this X value in advance. So if I had draw 5, I could declare that I will draw 3 and then I proceed and draw the 3 cards. And with the explanation of keywords, we come to the end of this video. If you like our videos and want to see more, please subscribe to my channel. And until next time, have fun and play more board games.